everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have a really great panel of people to talk about a very important subject, and that is the pressures and the stresses in leadership today that have led more and more to burnout across many industries. So I want to start by introducing myself and the panel, and you see we're going to represent four very different industries with different sizes of organizations. But guess what? The problems exist with everyone. So let me start. I'm the smallest group here. I am Susan Albano. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Prime Healthcare, which is an 80 provider independent multi-specialty medical group in Connecticut. We have about 250 employees, so just a little smaller than some of the ladies you'll hear from today. So Jen, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm Jen Ackerman. I'm the Deputy Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of the Interior. So we're a federal organization, so think National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife. So thank you and great to be here today.
Lisa?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lisa Miller. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer for Stanley Consultants, which is an engineering consulting firm, about 900 employees. And thanks for having me.
And Robin.
Yes, thank you for having me. I am Robin Soretti. I am the Head of Human Resources and People Strategy for Restaurant Associates, and I've been in my role for 21 years.
So the topic today is strategic leadership, which we've talked about in these meetings for years. But the focus today is really going to be on self-care, mental health, and performance under very stressful environments, because leadership today isn't about just hitting KPIs. It is about so much more than that. And I think executives are facing demands in ways that probably have a lot of them have been there for a long time, but in very different ways. And each industry might be very different, and you never know what's going to come up. And I'm very fortunate that the women on this panel today have expressed a desire to be open and vulnerable about their personal experiences here, both with their companies and themselves. And I think that's what's often missing with people, especially very high up in the leadership chain of command, is that we value and we wear stress like a badge of honor, right? We value the fact that we are available 24/7, that our devices are always with us, that you can reach me. Don't worry if I'm on vacation on the beach, just call me if you need me. Well, what does that do for us? And that's what I want to explore today. I want to explore it in us personally, in our teams, and how we manage. So I want to start by asking our panel, and feel free, ladies, to just jump in, to identify for me the signs of burnout. What do you see both in yourself and in your teams and in your organization that leads you to, that might make you think that we have an issue here?
I'm happy to go first. And I think all of us have been, very busy, in HR. I think there's always things going on in the human resource world. This year, we've been very busy. We have a surge in hiring firefighters and law enforcement. We have a lot of those. You can't, read the news without seeing, a lot of activity in those two communities. And so HR is pivotal to hire those. And they want HR to work on the weekends, and they want them to work in the evening. Where is we call it certificate. Where's my certificate? It's the hiring certificate of my applicants. And sometimes you can tell people are getting burned out when they start to either make mistakes, not a qualified applicant, or they start to kind of gnaw at each other. You can see the tension when people generally work, well together, they're not working as well. And that's when, as a leader, you have to kind of step in and say, maybe you need a break. Maybe you need some time off. I know we've had some Saturdays and Sundays working when generally we generally don't, because we had to ramp up. We have fire season. It's getting longer and longer. And our visitor season for the national parks is getting longer. And we have rangers that are protection. And so we have, law enforcement rangers. So we're having to ramp up. And so you can tell when people are bickering with each other or making more mistakes. So, and So we can tell, and you have to kind of let them take a knee, take some time off. And so I kind of, I was also in the Army as an Army officer. So you kind of know when people are tired, they're bickering and they're making mistakes. So those are two traits that I look for.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Signs that we got an issue.
I think I could just build on what Jen was saying. I agree with the two traits that she said, but for myself personally, I find that when I'm feeling a little bit burned out, I have more difficulty making decisions. So decision making actually slows down, and I find that I procrastinate more as well, where it's just you need to get something done, but you just can't get enough energy behind it to go do it. So those are a couple of the things that I notice in myself, and I've also noticed in my teams as well. So along with what Jen said, I think those are a couple of things that I look at.
That's great. I call it brain fog because I get that all the time, and it's not my old age. I think it's part of the stress and the burnout. But I just keyed on something you said, and it's true. Putting things off. Just put that. I think you're absolutely right, and I don't know that I've identified that in myself, but that happens a lot. Where I'm just not going to do this, and it's because I don't want to have to deal with that stress. Robin, anything from you? Anything else that you think of as signs of stress? And
the things that I usually can take care of very methodically become very blurred, and on the personal, I was actually I was on vacation last week, and the week before I was actually saying to someone, I can tell I need a vacation. Everything's bothering me right now. So I think, and we talked about, I think one of the things that we've been trying to do is to get people to recognize those signs. You started off saying we used to plow through it, and we used to prop ourselves up as if we could handle it. And I don't know that I would have said 3 years ago, oh, I need a break and I'm looking forward to my vacation. So I think we've started breaking down those barriers so that we can be more vulnerable with ourselves and put ourselves a little bit more first, and let people know, oh, this is bothering me. I'm really needing a break. I'm feeling overloaded. And I think we're opening up doors where we're having better conversations with our people. And and this was someone who reported to me, and you could see, he said, oh, thank you for sharing. And so I think when we start getting a little bit more real with each other, it helps each other understand that it's not about them. It's just, this is a moment in time, and this too shall pass.
that's excellent. I think if I was going to add to this, the irritability definitely, and some procrastination, but cynicism. I find myself getting more cynical about things. That's just something I've identified in myself. Definitely. I'm a high energy person, but when people and my people around me know when I'm low energy, that there's something going on there. So isolating. The other one is isolating. Like I have a standing desk. I don't sit. Like I said, I'm just probably ADHD undiagnosed, but I'm always moving around. When I stay in my office all day, people are like, oh my God, what's wrong with her? Because there's something going on, and I don't identify it when it's happening, but in retrospect, I can see it. And the last thing I've seen in myself, which I've been really trying to key in on these last few years, has been irritability with my team. So I have once a week, I have a small company. We have a small management team, and I meet with them weekly. And normally it's a fun, chaotic meeting where we have an agenda, but we go through everything, and it's an informal group. And I can see myself losing my patience when everyone's talking to each other, and I'll stop a conversation. That normally doesn't happen, but when that happens, I have to identify it myself, stop, take a breath, and we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the tactics we employ. So what do you think are the tensions between organizational performance and our performance? What are those tensions that lead us to get to this point of stress? What are the things going on? And it might be very industry specific. I'll start this one and say, in healthcare in 2020, we had that little thing called COVID. That was big for everyone, but in healthcare, I mean, we all had to come to work. We all had to be here. I had a partner die of COVID before the vaccine was available. It was a very, very stressful time. That was when my personal journey of self-care and valuing that portion of my leadership became important to me. So what are some of the other things in your industry that have been that tension, those sort of invisible weights you have to carry?
Well, if we're talking about industry, in COVID, we probably laid off 90% of our employees. I worked within the human resources department to grow the organization. It's a growing organization. We're very lucky today. It continues to grow, but working hard to lay a people strategy down, to turn around, to lay people off, was probably one of the most difficult things I feel like I've gone through professionally. And we're in a good space now recovering, and we've grown back really quickly and very fast. But also that fast growth has been, everybody's changing. My department's changing. We're a client-facing company. They're changing. So we're still trying to recognize each other and what other people need. And I feel that those are also causing the tensions because everybody's trying to figure it out. I actually feel relieved when I'm like, oh, you're going through that too, or, oh, it's not just us. And I think everybody's trying to figure out, how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we still sustain competition? How do we be in the positions that we are? And how, especially as human resources professional, how are we creating environments where our employees are feeling like, and you had said, a safe space to come to professionally and personally. So we've collided with bringing in empathy as a piece of the puzzle. And recently I'm finding, I just wrote an article that's coming out in our newsletter, and it's about how are we balancing empathy with accountability with well-being. And I think those are the pieces where we're trying to say, how do we still have to run a business to be successful? We still need to take care of employees, but is one overriding the other right now? And I feel that it's a change management we're all going through. And I sometimes relate to us as being toddlers. We're going through the next stage of life right now, and we're growing up differently after this thing called COVID.
What else? What are the tensions that you face that lead to this?
Yeah, I think that I think we get so caught up in, in my environment, and I think in the human capital, everything is so fast paced. Where is this action? Where is this action? And it's a fire drill every day. That I mean, I'm constantly bombarded with where is this action, so to speak. And so it's hard to do strategic planning, take time to mentor and coach, and do the things that I think that you need to do. Obviously, the actions, the recruitment actions, the my pay's messed up, the timekeeping are very important. But you need to take time as leaders. We as leaders need to take time to coach, mentor, and to do strategic planning for the organization. So I think we get mired down in these actions, these fires, the alligators, whatever you want to call them, and you don't take time. And obviously you can delegate, but a lot of, who comes to you? The leaders come to you. And so you get mired down in all that. So I think it's important to take time to go to do your strategic planning, go to your development opportunities, take your one-on-ones with your leaders, do the coaching and the mentoring. I really liked what Robin said about change management. We recently did a big reorganization, and I think change management is a lot of that. You moved my cheese, and because people are very important in how we take time to listen to them and deal with their thoughts and so forth. And so I feel that that's very important to take that time, because it's easy to cancel that one-on-one. And I resonated with what you said about, if you're not feeling that energy with your meeting, sometimes it's better to come to that meeting with the energy, so you're present. So So I feel like sometimes we're just caught up in the day-to-day activities, and we need to take that focus time for those development and strategic planning and so forth.
I think that's excellent. It's we get mired with tasks, right?
Yes, tasks.
It's,
Yeah.
I've got to check this box. I've got to fill this out. I've got to complete this form. I've got to make sure we do this. And it's hard. It's hard. And we're going to explore, how do we do that? How do we find that time? But anything else to add, Lisa? Anything from your industry or anything that causes those tensions for you?
I mean, some of that I think is just increased complexity in the environment. You know, there's just, the pace of change. So we're talking about change management. Well, that change management is becoming ever more important in terms of, having that as a strong capability, not only from, within the HR function, but, all of our leaders have to have the ability to do strong change management just because of that rate of change. But the complexity one is an interesting one too, where, I think we're all dealing with things that maybe we didn't have to deal with before. Like, I think our lives were maybe, a few years back, even they were simpler, more siloed. Everything is more interdependent now. And you really have to be well versed in, a lot of, areas outside of your chosen area of expertise in order to be effective within your area of expertise. And I think that drives, additional burden and tension and, tendency towards burnout as well.
So that's a great lead into what are those characteristics then that we as leaders have to have, and that we as leaders have to help support and grow in our staff, in our employees? What are those traits and just work styles that are going to help deal with all the things you mentioned, because they're all true? I mean, Robin, you started with empathy. I thought that was a really good point, that we have to build in empathy. But what are some of the other traits or characteristics that you have had to develop, or you think make you successful in managing through these difficult, complex situations?
That building on the empathy piece, I think it's broader, right? Like, emotional intelligence used to be considered a nice to have, and I think now we have to develop it ourselves. We have to filter for it. We have to develop it in others, because it's now a necessity to deal with all of these things. So I think it's gone beyond a nice to have, or a what we like to call a soft skill. I actually no longer think it's a soft skill. I think it's actually just a real skill that we need to develop in a very deliberate way.
I agree. Do you look for that when you're interviewing leaders, especially in leadership positions? Do you seek? I mean, I haven't thought of it this way, but I think that's one of those check boxes. I want to see what someone's emotional intelligence is for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, testing out how people behave in certain situations and, really getting to the heart of what their mindset is when they go into a situation, especially a difficult one, I think speaks volumes to their, to their emotional intelligence. Like, are they really considering, the impact that they're having on other people? Are they aware of, do they have the self-awareness? So just all the different, pillars of emotional intelligence. I think there's ways to interview for it. And I definitely am looking at that when I'm interviewing for everybody, but, it's more important for anybody that's likely to be in a leadership position, in the organization.
I'll tell you, early in my career, and I'm going to be very vulnerable and tell you this story, because it's not a proud moment. And it was well before we talked about emotional intelligence and EQ and things like that. But I forget all the circumstances, but in a meeting, I actually made someone cry, and that devastated me, because I was so passionate, I'll say, but I was probably being a bully. I wouldn't let it go, and I didn't manage it. I didn't think about how the other person in the room was going to respond to my aggressiveness, I guess it was. And again, it was so inconsequential. I don't remember what the subject matter is, but I'll never forget the fact that I made this young woman cry, and it devastated me. And that's when, before it had a name, I started thinking, I need to know what my actions are doing in people. And then even more, what caused me to have that kind of intense reaction that's going to make someone cry? It's me. It's not the other person. So, yeah, and I didn't even have a name for it back then, but now I have at least a name and I can work on something. Anyone else? Traits, characteristics that you see in yourself, that you want to see in yourself, that you want to develop?
I think it's interesting when you bring up the emotional intelligence piece. We just completed talent reviews, and it's the first time we've had leaders actually say, do we have classes in emotional intelligence? How do I create that self-awareness? And so we're in an exploratory fashion right now saying, what classes can we teach? How do you teach it? So people are asking for it because I think exactly what you're talking about is how it goes back to this balance. How do we get the work done, balance that empathy, give direction in a positive manner, but still know how to hold people accountable. And I think that's the piece that is, again, the balance. I keep using that because it is a balance, but I find it interesting that emotional intelligence came up. I just found it fascinating that people are asking for that. I don't know that I ever remembered a time. I mean, you just mentioned it, we didn't even know it had a name. Now it does, and it's out there, and people want to get better at it, which is really positive.
Yeah, I think that in the senior executive core in the government, we have these core competencies, and one is building coalitions, like building relationships, and it goes to and I did work in the private sector for Deloitte, and it really is who you know and who you get along with, and that is, I think that's throughout everything that you do, and I think that is also what we're all kind of touching on here as well is, how you make people feel, and people want to work with people they like and who make them feel good about themselves. And so building relationships, building coalitions, and I think that is a foundation. And it has a correlation with building empathy. I mean, if you have empathy for people, they want to be around you. Kindness, like, hey, I know that this person can help me get something done. And so that is a key one. I mean, obviously results driven, mission driven, bottom line, and so forth. Those are kind of the standard ones, but building relationships, building coalitions, and I have a new boss, and he's like, we want to treat people with dignity, and it's nice to hear, because I feel that is something that we need to continue to do, even if it's like, hey, I didn't get paid, where's my action? It's always about the action or something like that. But you can still treat people when you're frustrated with dignity, have emotional intelligence, and build those relationships. And I think that's the foundation, is building those relationships. And that's what we're doing here, is building relationships.
Exactly. I think that's an excellent point. And again, going back to my terrible
exactly.
story.
Yes.
By the way, she still works for the organization, and we're friends. But and maybe I'm better now. And I'm like, wait a minute, everyone likes me. Why is this person crying? Everyone likes me. But relationships. Think about it. What's that saying? In a world where you can be anything, be kind. Be kind. There's no excuse not to be kind, even if you're firing someone, even if you've got to let someone go, even if you've got to make some drastic changes. There's no reason not to be kind. And I think relationships, when you have relationships, the world is your oyster. You can get anything done. Absent relationships, you are struggling an uphill battle to get anything done, whether it's with your colleagues, your employees, your competitors, anything. So I think there should be classes in relationship building, but it's also, does it come naturally? Do leaders do leaders have these traits and that's why they become leaders, or can you teach someone these traits?
People are more apt to become leaders if they already have that capability or that skill. But I do think it can be taught as well. But I do think it is difficult to teach somebody, emotional intelligence. It can be improved for sure, but it's not necessarily everybody's default setting. And so I think it can be challenging. So I think it's a little bit of, personally, I think it's a little bit of both.
Interesting. I'm probably the oldest
agree.
person on this call. Have you seen it? Have you seen it in yourselves improve with age and experience? You obviously have a core set of skills that got you where you were. I find like I've gotten better as I've gotten older.
Yes, I think the more experience you get, the more self-aware you become, and you're like, hey, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room all the time.
Yes.
I don't have to be right all the time, and you're more willing, I think, to accept that you're not everything to everybody, and more willing to look at things not so much in black and white, but in sort of shades of gray. Because I think something that was touched on a couple of times was this balance of being kind or being empathetic, but that doesn't mean that you don't do what's necessary, and that you're not holding people accountable. And I think that's a tough transition for people who don't have this skill to make, is they confuse empathy or emotional intelligence even with being nice. And I don't think that's the right corollary.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to agree with that. And one of the pieces that I'm bringing forward with our CEO is we did Brene Brown Dare to Lead, where she says clear as kind. So it's being direct with people can still mean that there's kindness in that, because if we're not helping people become self-aware or working with each other and bringing people along together, then we've created that siloness that I think used to probably appear more in the past. How do we pivot in our own selves to be the person that people want to follow, and also be vulnerable enough to say, I've just made a mistake and I'm really sorry and I'm going to work to change that? And people can change. I do believe that that's possible. And if we don't learn from our mistakes, or we keep making the same mistakes over, then that's when it becomes a different conversation.
I think there are some people that are very naturally gifted with some leadership styles. And you can kind of see it in some, teenagers and so forth. They're just, people naturally follow them in some cases. But then I think some people, kind of have to work at it. And then some people, that are just not, they just don't have that. But I think generally, I think people, if they can learn from their mistakes, so I appreciated what Robin and Lisa said, they can learn and grow. And I do think over time you become, if you invest in yourself, you can become better over time. And I think a lot of people do. So I do agree with that sentiment, that you can learn. And I think that's why development is key. I think there's some very good senior training courses out there that you can, it's really reflecting on yourself is what I think is helpful.
So that's a great lead in, Jen, because I want you all to get very introspective now and personal and tell me what you personally do to make space for self-care in your jobs. And I'm going to go last this time, but what do you personally do and is successful for you in making that kind of space for yourself?
Well, I get up every morning and I have a stationary bike. So I bike for 30 minutes. I do a little bit of work and some weight work, but it's the way that I get that piece in. And I do find that it's super helpful for me to start my day. And it's a commitment that I've made for myself.
So, Jen, what do you do for yourself? Come on, it's something.
So I commute a little bit. So I commute an hour to and from work. So I'm not able to do, so I work out more on the weekends. But I go to bed very early. So I go to bed quite early. My sleep is the most important thing. My husband's like, it's very early, kind of makes fun of me. So I'm very much into my sleep. I think that's the most important thing for me right now is sleep. And I really have, I'm kind of weird. I eat the same thing almost every day. So I eat the same thing every day. I'm very much into like nutrition. And so that's probably my thing. But the weekends is when I do my exercise, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, Robin, kudos to you. I'm envious that you do that. So those are my commitments to myself.
I think for me, to make space for some of that self-care, what's been effective is just setting some specific boundaries. And those change over time. And, they may be boundaries around, hey, I'm blocking off this time of day, or I'm only willing to spend this amount of time on this type of an activity, those kinds of things. I remember earlier in my career, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I was still at Intel. I had kids at home. Meetings were getting completely out of hand, very early, very late, all day, every day. And I just stopped accepting meetings before 7 a.m. And that was like the boundary that I needed in order to get kids off to school, but also to get it. I'm a triathlete. And so, much like Robin, I prioritize, getting my training done early in the morning because I'm useless at night. I have way too many excuses not to do it. So I have to sort of protect that early morning time. So that was one of the boundaries that I set. And I knew that I'd been successful in doing that when one of the leaders that I worked with, there was a meeting on the calendar coming for, I think it was 6 a.m. And he told the person who set the meeting, he said, well, you better actually change that meeting because Lisa won't show up. So that's how I knew that my boundary setting in that particular circumstance was actually successful.
That's great. Well, it looks like we're all active because I'm the same. I've done triathlons and marathons, but I found as there would be, if I missed a morning run, I was off all day. And then I broke my ankle. Now, I had almost 2 years before I was back to full functioning, and it was a killer. It was a killer. So I discovered several years ago mindfulness. And for someone who's, again, probably ADHD, always moving, standing at her desk. I've got a bike. I actually have a bike in my office that fits under my desk. The value, and this is so important to me now, the value of making 5 minutes for just breathing or just sitting or closing my office, sometimes turning off the lights, closing my door, and just sitting. So I make a habit almost every morning. I have a dog, so I walk my dog. I can meditate while I'm walking the dog, but I try to find at least 5 minutes to sit alone with my thoughts and set my intentions for the day. Just not even outspoken, but just in my mind and body, set my intentions for the day. And I have found that has been so valuable to me. I think it is, honestly, I'm 68 years old and I'm still working and intend to work for quite a while longer. I think that has extended my desire to stay working at this high level because I've made space. And honestly, and I'd like you guys to weigh in on this, if we're better, put on your own face mask in the plane before you put it on the kids. If we're better, our teams are better and our organizations are better. So it will take different forms. It will be an exercise spike. It will be eating the same thing and going to bed early. It will be, getting your workout in. It'll be something different for everyone, but making that space is so critical and finding that something that works for you, right? So how do we make space in our organizations? How do we take this need for self-care, for mindfulness, for health and well-being and incorporate it into the KPIs that we're all chasing, the performance that we're all chasing? How do we make it part of, do I evaluate my management staff on how well they take care of themselves? I'm thinking out loud now. Give me some thoughts on that.
My previous job, I actually had a KPI for my team about taking taking vacation.
Excellent.
Because people didn't want to take vacation, and that's a really important thing, is to be able to disconnect. But then along with that is, okay, if you're going to take vacation or PTO, however you refer to it, it's important to actually disconnect. And I think that our role for our organizations is to role model that, because it doesn't matter what we say, it matters what we do, because that's what people key off of. And if we are recognizing people for doing that, and I think it's a good way to encourage people to do that, and take care of their well-being. I mean, it used to be like a badge of honor to. I think we talked about this earlier, right? It's used to be a badge of honor to say, well, I only need like 4 hours of sleep, tonight. And I'm available 24/7 and that kind of thing. And, every study ever done on high performance says that's absolutely not true. And if we want high performance out of our teams, we have to start with, role modeling. How do you get high performance out of yourself, I think.
Are we, and I'm going to say this, especially as women, why did we let that happen? Why did any executive, but especially as women, why did we let it be that we have to be available 24/7? Because I'm the same way. I did it. I was in Sri Lanka once and I got a call at 2 a.m. and I didn't say it's 2 a.m. Why are you calling me? I dealt with the issue. Why do we do that? Is it the people pleasing? Is it we're trying to get, I wonder why we do that and why we don't set the boundaries sooner.
First of all, we're in the human resources profession, so that equals help.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we think we're helping, we think we're leaning in, and we think that when that call comes in, ignoring it means, oh no, I'm not being supportive. And it goes back to this concept of balance. Lisa just mentioned vacation. I went on vacation last week. I turned everything off. And I came back to a team that there were some big projects that were going on last week and some things I probably could have been a little, but I turned off, and everybody said to me, we've got it. And they did. And so what it shows is that when you're giving people that space, they want you to enjoy your vacation because they know you're propping them up. And then they want you to come back and they want you to be proud of, look what we did while you were gone. I jumped on a call yesterday and I went, it was down. It was like they knocked it out of the park. And I found myself just sending emails to people. Thank you. Great job last week. Thank you for taking care of this. My head of talent, before going away on vacation, it was performance reviews. We were 26%. Week later, we were 99% completed. She stayed on top of it. So everybody did their part. And I came back to going, oh, I got a great team around me. Look what they were able to do. So I think, there's that misnomer. If you're not on vacation, things aren't happening. And guess what? They did happen. And when we give it that space and we recognize that we don't have to manage it, people want to be trusted, that's a win-win for everyone.
And you thanked them, you rewarded them. I think that's really important.
You have to. If you don't say thank you, then you're not. Yeah.
Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think also, like what Robin, you were saying about turning your phone and stuff off. I think it's also good that when we're not responding one thing to respond, but to email, because if we're working, then it sets the tone that they should work or other people should work. And people notice that, like, well, some people want to really disconnect. And I don't think that people should think that they should be responding on leave. But I also think it's not just leave. It's like, what else can we do? We have bureaus like Park Service and U.S. Geological Survey, and they do a lot of things, to promote health and well-being. And they'll have, we do fitness subsidies, which I think people really like. We have a gym. And, we can give 59 minutes because that's not a full hour of leave. So, 50. So, and so if it's slow, a manager can say, you can take off 59 minutes early because, we do submit time cards hourly, even though most people are salaried. So it's like, oh, you can take off 59 minutes early. So there's a lot of things that, managers can do to promote a sense of well-being or community with employees. And I remember when COVID started and we all had to go home, and it was like, what can we do? And so we, some people started a plank challenge, like how long can you do a plank for? And maybe it's time to kind of get back to something like that to show, and then sometimes people start I don't know if Weight Watchers is still around, but I think there's things to do to start community.
GLP-1s now. There's no more Weight Watchers, all GLP-1s. But
I mean, I don't know about that, but like I work downtown and I'm right near the monuments, and so sometimes people meet and they go running around the monuments, which is nice. So there's all sorts of things to do depending on where you're at to have a little bit of community, and sometimes it just takes the leader to say, well, I'll go with you to do that. So maybe just being a little bit creative in some ways, and especially with, you having a smaller office or you being a leader in some of those, to say, okay, anybody want to do that? Something of that nature. And so sometimes we haven't done it lately, but maybe it's something, maybe in the new year to start something of that nature. Like, does anybody want to start a meditation, lead us in a meditation or something like that, and how to start your day, and because I know starting meditation can be a little bit challenging because people are antsy and they can't just center themselves. So we've thought of things of that nature. It's hard to stick with it when you're busy.
Making space then, and we have to
making space,
prioritize, and I think figure out how we fit that all in. We did something when I got here 15 years ago to this practice. I asked, after several weeks in, I asked my HR director, I think we give a half an hour lunch. But on Thursdays, there was an hour lunch. Every other Thursday was an hour lunch. I said, why do we have an hour lunch on every other Thursday? They said, oh, because we get paid on that Thursday and it's for cashing the checks. I said, okay. And I went back to my office. I said, wait a minute. We have to listen. Why do we have an extra hour on Thursday? But it was one of those celebrations. It was one of those things they gave. So I thought it was stupid. So I ended it. So what we did instead, in the summer, we have half day Fridays. So our full day work week ends midday Friday, and everyone can get their weekend started earlier. But it's that little celebration that says, we recognize you're working really hard. Go enjoy the sunshine. Of course, it rains in Connecticut all the time, but whatever. Go enjoy the sunshine and do something good. So that's a great point, Jen. And I think making a community, I think you used the word community too, is important. So let's end with sort of systemic fixes now, not the outings, the changing of KPI for vacation, but and I don't know the answer to this. What can we do for our organizations? My goodness, the federal government, how can they value, stress, being able to manage stress or self-care and things like that? I feel like talking with people like you creates sort of an accountability or vulnerability circle. I think maybe having safe spaces to talk to, maybe one of my leadership meetings, we just talk about that. We don't talk about the new people coming in or the new doctor starting then and where are we with this credentialing. We talk about, I'm thinking out loud there, we talk about how are you feeling and how do you manage when you're not feeling well? Can you guys think of any other systemic fixes we can put into our organizations?
Some of the best advice I ever got was at work was, now that you're moving into a leadership type role, you need to get okay with not being able to get everything done. And so I think, kind of sharing that perspective with our teams and sort of addressing maybe some of the root cause of the overwork and everything. I know in a lot of cases, my teams are like, not only do I have to get everything done, but to the point that was made earlier, we're in HR, so we want to help. And, we've set this expectation that we're going to get back to people within an hour. And I literally just had, a conversation with one of my team members this week, which was, look, everything is not an emergency. We need to get out of that mode of like, we owe people, a response immediately on something that isn't really urgent. So it's, really evaluating the urgency of some things. But then I think it's also, if we've prioritized correctly, if we get the priorities done, the rest of it may or may not get done. And that's okay. And so that's something that, as a type A person, I've had to work really hard on because it's uncomfortable, but it is one of those ways to sort of address systemically, like the overwork and the overburdening. It's like what, urgency versus importance, I guess is how I would put that, and just sort of managing that piece of our work.
I like that, urgency versus importance. In the medical field, there are things that are emergent. If you're having chest pain, you call 911. There are other things that aren't emergent, but they might be urgent. They might be important. But that's an excellent way of putting it in the management style too. Others, systemic fixes?
I've actually started, even with my team, saying, is this self-imposed? Right. So ask yourself, is the date movable? Whose priority is it? Right. So asking the question so that you can prioritize, and actually even saying to somebody, when do you need this by? And starting to level set those expectations of, oh, I can get this to you next Wednesday. Is that fine? Oh, yes, it is. So I think that's a really good one, because that you had used the word intention earlier, and I think we don't sometimes use or think that way, but with intention of where are we adding value? How are we adding value? And how are we moving the organization forward? Because as leaders, we still have to be thinking of that direction of where we need to be leading wherever it is that we're moving, because you still have to get to the end game. But making people feel like it isn't an emergency, right? Because others will make you feel like their emergency is something you need to be doing in front of them, and it's not. It's really not at the end of the day.
I like what Lisa and Robin both said. If everything if everything's a priority, nothing is. So does it match to your strategic goals? And so, but I think we miss sometimes on, is this urgent, and what's the deadline? And now, obviously, if our agency head or secretary wants it, that's, we're going to go ahead and take care of that. But pretty much everybody else, we're gonna figure out what that time frame is going to be. Because I have people that, oh, we got to have this now. I'm like, oh no, this is not urgent. We'll deal with that next week or something of that nature. And some other systemic things that we. Sometimes people say, oh, this is something that popped up, but we have these meetings with our ombudsman. I don't know if they're like our sort of like they're mediators, and our EEO, and our general counsel, and our office. And, we meet every 2 weeks. We've done this for years to kind of get a pulse on things in the workforce. Because sometimes, I don't know about your office in the private sector, but we get a lot of complaints on things. And then somebody wants to go and look at, is this a systemic problem? And then we'll huddle with these other colleagues to find out. So sometimes and they want to do an investigation on all these things. So it's kind of having these coalitions and partners to find out, are these really other things that we need to spend our time on? And so we've kind of looked at other things to see, are these really other priorities we need to spend our time on? And so we've made other things, like you said, how do we look at other things that can be systemic in our organization? And it's building other coalitions with other partners, other stakeholders.
I think this is great. And I think this has been a great discussion. I've certainly learned a lot. I think we all agree that, stress isn't a badge of honor. That resilience isn't just a buzzword, but I think most importantly, that sustainable leadership isn't selfish. it's necessary for us to succeed as leaders and as organizations. So Jen, Lisa, Robin, thank you so much for being so open and honest with your thoughts. And I think this has been terrific, and I hope everyone else feels the same way and has learned as much as I have. So thank you.